Long before the night, when the scorpion asked the frog for a ride, the forest was already whispering secrets. It was the end of the dry season. The leaves, once green and alive, now snapped like glass. The air carried the smell of stagnant earth and distant smoke. Everyone knew, soon the fire would come, but no one dared to speak of it. The forest, after all, had its own rituals of silence. The two sides of the forest. On the northern bank of the river lived the frogs, creatures of simple bodies but collective minds. They trusted one another, worked together, and believed survival came from cooperation. On the southern bank, however, crawled the scorpions, isolated, proud, carrying in their venom not just a weapon to kill, but the curse of never being able to trust. If the frogs represented hope, the scorpions represented eternal suspicion. The frog who thought too much. Among the frogs, there was one who stood apart. They called him only the old frog, not because of his age, but because his eyes seemed to carry a weight the others could not understand. While the young one sang by the water's edge, he remained silent, staring at the current. He questioned everything. If we always trust, won't we be the first to fall when betrayal comes? The others laughed. Don't live in fear, brother. The river protects those who believe. But inside the old frog's heart, there was a shadow. He sensed that the world was far crueler than the northern bank wanted to admit. The scorpion who hated himself. On the other side, among the burning stones, crawled a solitary scorpion. He had no name, for scorpions did not need names. They simply existed, ready to strike and survive. But this one was different. He hated his own stinger. At night, he often stared at the curved tip glistening under the moonlight. He thought, why was I born with this? Why was I condemned to be feared, rejected, hated? He longed to be something else. A bird soaring free, a fish gliding through water, anything that did not carry venom in its body. But whenever he tried to approach another creature, a single sudden movement was enough, and his instinct exploded. The stinger struck before the mind could think, and when he realized it was always too late, another life taken, another scar on his soul. The river as a border. The river was more than water. It was an invisible wall between two worlds. On one side, trust. On the other, destructive instinct. And everyone believed crossing was impossible. But the river was also a mirror. And those who looked closely realized the frog and the scorpion were not so different after all. One trusted, even knowing he might suffer. The other harmed, even knowing he did not want to. The forest's omen. That year, before the fire, the forest felt more restless than ever. The wind sighed like a lament. The birds fled too early. And even the elders whispered that something was wrong in the air. The old frog felt the omen in every dive. The lonely scorpion felt it in every sleepless night. It was as if both on opposite banks already knew their destinies would soon collide, as if the river itself were waiting for an inevitable pact. The reflection, perhaps the greatest tragedy, was not the fire to come, nor the scorpion's sting, nor the frog's naivety. The true tragedy lay in the fate that never forgives, in the essence each being carries, an essence they cannot escape. And while the forest prepared to burn, the two, the questioning frog and the regretful scorpion, walked paths that would soon converge, not because they wished it, but because the river, like life itself, always demands encounters we try to avoid. It began with smoke. Thin, gray lines rising on the horizon, weaving through the branches like whispers. The animals pretended not to notice at first. They went on with their songs, their hunts, their rituals of survival. Denial is easier than fear, but the forest knew. The ground grew warmer. The leaves curled inward as if bracing for pain. The air itself thickened, pressing on every chest like a warning. The fire was coming. The frogs' council. On the northern bank, the frogs gathered in a circle. Their voices rose in anxious croaks. The river will protect us, said one. The fire has never crossed to our side, said another. The water is safety. But the old frog remained silent. He stared at the current, the slow swirl of muddy water. "What if the river is not enough?" he finally asked. The others turned to him, startled. Blasphemy. The river has always saved us. Yet the old frog's eyes saw further. He knew that fire had no memory, no mercy. What it devoured once, it could devour again. And so he whispered, almost to himself, "Perhaps the greatest danger is not the fire itself, but believing we are untouchable." The scorpion's division. Across the water, the scorpions gathered on the hot rocks. Unlike the frogs, they did not discuss escape. They discussed survival. Some sharpened their stingers on stone, as if preparing for war. Others sought deeper burrows, hiding from the inevitable. The solitary scorpion, the one who hated his own venom, listened in silence. His kin spoke with pride, arrogance, cruelty. "The fire will burn them before it burns us. Let the frogs choke on smoke, we will endure." But he felt no pride, only a growing weight in his chest. Because he knew the truth, the fire did not choose sides. The smoke over the river. By dusk, the smoke had reached the water. It hung low, swallowing the horizon in a shroud of gray. Birds scattered. The insects went silent, and for the first time, both banks felt the same fear. The old frog sat at the edge, his throat tight. The scorpion perched on a stone, his tail curled close to his body. Neither saw the other, but both stared at the same darkening sky, the same rising smoke. Two souls, mirrors across the water. Reflection, the nature fear. Fear is not the fire itself. Fear is the silence that precedes it, the gnawing voice that asks, "What if I cannot run fast enough? What if I cannot escape myself?" The frogs feared losing the protection of the river. The scorpions feared nothing. And yet, in their arrogance, they feared the truth. That survival is meaningless if it turns you into ash. The fire had not yet reached the forest, but it had already begun to consume them. It began with a roar, a sound like the sky itself tearing apart. Flames leapt across the southern horizon, swallowing trees in waves of orange fury. The heat came next, a wall of breathless air, searing skin, cracking bark. And then the light, a false dawn, painting the night with red and gold. The forest was no longer waiting. The fire had arrived. The scorpions in panic. On the southern bank, the scorpions scattered, their stone burrows filled with smoke. Their proud tails trembled. "To the river," some cried. But the river, once ignored, now shimmered as their only escape. The solitary scorpion watched his kin rush in chaos. They fought each other for space, striking in blind terror. Survival, once their creed, now became their curse. He felt the old instinct rise, the urge to sting, to lash out, to destroy in order to live. But for the first time, he resisted. For the first time, he wondered, if survival means only harming, what kind of life is left? The frogs in doubt. On the northern bank, the frogs clung to their faith. The fire cannot cross the river. The water will shield us. But the old frog knew better. He watched as sparks leapt from branch to branch, carried by the wind. He saw dry reeds on the river's edge ignite like kindling, and he whispered, "The fire does not need to cross. It consumes whatever stands too close." The others laughed nervously, but their eyes betrayed fear. Faith begins to fracture when the flames are near enough to touch. The first meeting of eyes. Through the smoke, for the first time, the old frog and the solitary scorpion saw each other. Two silhouettes, divided by the trembling current. One crouched low, muscles tense. The other perched high, tail coiled in restraint. Neither moved, neither spoke. But in that instant, they recognized something terrifying. That despite their differences, they were both trapped in the same fire. It was the first silent thread of fate tying them together. Reflection, the fire inside. The fire outside the forest was only half the truth. The greater blaze burned within. In the frogs, it was a fire of denial, clinging to a hope that might betray them. In the scorpions, it was a fire of pride, destroying even when destruction meant doom. And in the two who watched each other from opposite banks, the old frog and the solitary scorpion, the fire took another form. It became a question. Can we escape not the flames around us, but the flames within? The flames now lit the edges of both banks. Smoke curled like dark hands around the branches. The river, once a sanctuary, became a narrow strip of salvation, a final chance to survive. Frogs leapt desperately into the water. Some swam toward deeper reeds. Others pressed against one another, trying to vanish beneath the surface. The old frog, however, did not move. He stared across the current, where chaos reigned among the scorpions. And he waited, because he knew something was coming. Something the river could no longer keep apart. The scorpion's choice. The solitary scorpion stood at the edge of the flames. Behind him, fire. Before him, the river. He saw his kin drowning in desperation, clinging to stones, stinging each other in panic. And he felt the pull of instinct, the venom begging to strike. But this time, he resisted again. He looked across the water and saw the old frog watching him. Those eyes, calm, steady, unblinking, pierced deep in the fire. And for the first time, he whispered to himself, perhaps survival requires something more than instinct. The first words. The scorpion stepped closer to the bank. His voice, raw with desperation, cut through the crackling fire. Frog. The old frog did not move. I need to cross. The fire will consume me. A long silence. Then the frog answered, his voice heavy, reflective. And if I carry you, will you not sting me? The scorpion lowered his head. His tail twitched, trembling like a lie exposed. If I sting you, I drown. If I drown, I die. I do not wish to die. The frog's eyes narrowed. But do you wish to live, or only to prolong the moment before your nature destroys you? The inner struggle. The scorpion felt the words strike like arrows. For deep inside he knew his venom was not a weapon, but a destiny. He hated it. He wished to deny it. And yet, every time it ruled him. But now, with the fire clawing closer, he longed, just once, to prove he could choose differently. His voice cracked, trembling with something close to prayer. I asked not for trust, only for a chance. Reflection, the paradox of trust. The river shimmered between them, glowing with reflective flame. It was no longer just water. It was a boundary between trust and betrayal, hope and despair. The frog reflected in silence. To save another may be noble, but to trust one who cannot master himself, is it courage or is it madness? And the scorpion reflected in agony. To ask for trust is to reveal weakness. Yet without it, I cannot live. Two truths, circling like fire and smoke. Neither could exist without the other. The decision. Finally, the old frog turned his body toward the current. His voice was low, steady like the river itself. Climb on, scorpion. But know this, if you sting me, it will not be the fire that kills us. It will be you and the truth you can never escape. The scorpion hesitated. His legs trembled. His tail quivered. And then, slowly, he crawled onto the frog's back. The first step into fate. The frog stepped into the river. The water was cool, yet heavy with ash falling from the sky. With each stroke, he felt the weight of the scorpion on his back. Not just in body, but in destiny. The scorpion clung tightly, his claws trembling. Every fiber is being screamed. Hold still. Do not strike. But the venom inside him pulsed like a second heart, whispering betrayal with every beat. The dialogue. Midway through the river, the frog spoke. Do you feel it, scorpion? The water beneath us. The fire behind us. The sky collapsing above us. The scorpion's voice shook. I feel only fear and shame, that I cannot escape what I am. The frog's stroke slowed, his voice heavy with sorrow. Perhaps none of us can. Perhaps the river is not to cross, but to reveal. The words struck deeper than the fire, deeper than the water. The scorpion closed his eyes and for a moment believed he could resist. The inevitable. But instinct is older than thought, older than will, older than desire. And as the current pulled stronger, as panic rose within him, his tail arched high and struck. The sting pierced the frog's back. The venom surged. The silence shattered. The frog gasped. The river swallowed his strength. And together, they began to sink. the last words, as the water closed over them. The frog's voice, weak but steady, reached the scorpion's ears. "Why? You said you would not sting me." The scorpion's eyes burned with agony, with self-hatred, with a truth too sharp to deny, and he whispered the words that would echo long after the flames had died. "I could not help it. It is in my nature." Reflection, the nature we cannot escape. The river swallowed them both. The fire raged on the banks, consuming trees, devouring lives. But beneath the surface, in that silent drowning, a lesson lingered. We can fight our instincts. We can beg, resist, deny. But sometimes, the very thing we wish to escape is the thing that defines us most. The frog had trusted and paid the price. The scorpion had betrayed and lost himself once more. Two creatures, bound not by choice, but by the eternal tragedy of nature. The legacy of fire and river. When the fire finally passed, and the forest stood in ashes, the tale of the frog and the scorpion remained, not as a children's story, not as a warning whispered in passing, but as a mirror held to every soul, reminding us that trust and betrayal, hope and instinct are rivers we all must cross. And in the silence after the flames, the forest remembered, because the frog and the scorpion were not just animals. They were all of us. The silence after the fire, the forest stood in ashes. The fire had devoured the trees, silenced the birds, and darkened the riverbanks with soot. But silence, as always, returned, and within that silence lingered the memory of two creatures, a frog and a scorpion, who drowned not merely in water, but in the inevitability of their own natures. Their story did not vanish with the flames. It spread like smoke, carried on the whispers of wind and memory. For their death was not just an end. It was a reflection, a mirror turned toward all who would hear it. What does it mean to trust? The frog knew the risk. He asked the question. He heard the promise. And still, he carried the scorpion across the river. Why? Perhaps because trust is not a calculation. It is not a bargain measured in certainty. Trust is an act of courage, to step forward, knowing the wound may come. And yet, in that courage lies tragedy. For to trust one who cannot master themselves is to bind your fate to their downfall. The frog was not naive. He was willing. And sometimes, willingness is the most dangerous form of faith. What does it mean to betray? The scorpion swore he would not sting. In his heart, he meant it. He longed to prove, just once, that he could rise above instinct, that he could rewrite the nature written into his blood. But when fear and panic surged, the venom leapt before his mind could restrain it. And in that moment, his truth was revealed. He was prisoner, not master, of what he carried inside. Betrayal is not always premeditated. Sometimes, it is a collapsible under the weight of nature. The scorpion did not choose to sting. He simply failed to choose otherwise. The fire within. The forest fire was fierce, yes, but it was only a shadow of the deeper blaze. The real fire burned within the frog and the scorpion. The fire of instinct, the fire of denial, the fire of hope, the fire of fear. External flames can be extinguished with water, but the flames of the soul, the urges we cannot tame, the fears we cannot silence, these consume us long before our bodies are ash. The frog and the scorpion were not destroyed by the fire around them. They were destroyed by the fire within, the paradox of nature. The scorpion's words echo even now. I could not help it. It is in my nature. A confession and a curse. Can we ever escape our nature? Can the cruel choose kindness? Can the fearful choose bravery? Can the broken choose wholeness? We like to believe so. We tell ourselves stories of transformation, of redemption. And sometimes it is true, but there are also truths that do not bend. Venom cannot be wished away. Instinct cannot be erased. Nature cannot be denied forever. The scorpion teaches us this. Sometimes, the greatest prison is not outside us, but within us, the weight of the frog's choice. The frog knew, and still, he chose. That is the other tragedy. For the frog represents us when we choose to trust. Not because it is safe, but because without trust, life itself loses meaning. To live without trust is to drown in suspicion. To live with trust is to risk betrayal. The frog chose betrayal. And in that choice, paradoxically, he chose life. Because only in risking pain do we prove that hope still breathes within us. The frog's death was not foolishness. It was sacrifice. It was the price of refusing to let fear rule him. To mirror the river. Imagine the river, still and dark, after the two had sunk beneath its surface. What does it reflect? The scorpion's agony. That even when he wanted to be different, he could not escape what he was. The frog's serenity. That even knowing the cost, he still offered his back. The river shows us both sides of the human soul, the weight of instinct and the courage of hope. And in that reflection, we see ourselves. Beyond the fable, the tale of the frog and the scorpion is not about animals. It is about us. How many times have we trusted, knowing betrayal was possible? How many times have we betrayed, not out of choice, but out of weakness? How many times have we stood at the edge of fire, caught between who we are and who we long to be? We are the frog when we risk. We are the scorpion when we fail. And we are the river, holding both truths at once. This is why the story endures. Not because of its ending, but because of the mirror it holds before us. The final reflection. In the end, the fire faded. The forest grew again. New leaves, new voices, new lives. But beneath the roots, in the soil enriched by ash, the story remained. The frog and the scorpion were gone, yet their truth lingered, woven into the memory of the earth. That trust is both the noblest and most dangerous of gifts. That instinct is both our strength and our prison. That nature, once revealed, cannot always be undone. And perhaps the deepest lesson is this. We are all crossing rivers, some with venom on our backs, some with faith in our hearts, and some with both, struggling to reconcile the two. The river will not wait. The fire will not hesitate. And the question remains, when the moment comes, will we be the frog? Will we be the scorpion? Or will we finally become something more?